April 15, 1938, Alcatraz Federal Penitentiary. Marcus "Iron Mike" Castellano had been planning it for 3 weeks, the moment that would either make him a legend or get him killed before morning. Dinner time, B Block. 300 of America's most dangerous men watched as Castellano walked past Al Capone's table, stopped, leaned over, and spat directly into Capone's mashed potatoes. The dining hall went silent. Guards reached for their batons. Every con held his breath. This was it. The moment Scarface would remind everyone why his name still meant death. But Capone just smiled, picked up his spoon, and ate the contaminated food while staring Castellano dead in the eyes. What happened next changed everything we thought we knew about America's most notorious criminal. Because that spit wasn't an insult, it was a message, and Capone's response wasn't weakness. It was the beginning of the most dangerous partnership in federal prison history. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. I should have spoken up that night. Should have blown my whistle, filed my report, done something, anything, other than stand there frozen like a rookie with piss running down his leg. But at 22, Vincent Torino was more terrified of the legend sitting at table 7 than he was of breaking protocol. Al Capone chewed slowly, methodically, his dead eyes never leaving Castellano's face. The silence stretched like a wire about to snap. 300 inmates sat motionless, forks halfway to mouths, waiting for the blood to start flowing. But it didn't. Instead, Capone swallowed, set down his spoon, and spoke in that gravelly Chicago accent that had ordered 1,000 deaths. Tastes better with seasoning. The dining hall erupted in nervous laughter. A few cons whistled. Iron Mike Castellano, 6'4" of pure muscle and rumored to have beaten 3 men to death with his bare hands, actually smiled back. Not the predatory grin of a man who'd just marked his territory, but something else. Something that made my stomach turn cold. Recognition. I watched from my position by the east wall as Capone gestured to the empty chair across from him. Castellano sat down like they were old friends meeting for Sunday dinner, instead of 2 apex predators sharing contaminated prison slop. They spoke in whispers, heads bent close, while the rest of the hall slowly returned to their meals. That's when I knew this wasn't random prison posturing. This was theater, a performance designed to look like one thing while being something else entirely. My partner, Eddie Kowalski, 15-year veteran with hands steady as stone, was gripping his baton so tight his knuckles had gone white. "What the hell just happened, kid?" I wanted to tell him I didn't know, wanted to believe what my eyes had seen, that America's most feared criminal had just shown weakness, that Iron Mike had somehow neutered Scarface with nothing but saliva and balls. But my gut told me different. My gut told me we'd just witnessed the opening move in a game none of us understood. The 2 men finished eating in companionable silence. When the dinner bell rang, they stood together, Capone clapping Castellano on the shoulder like a proud father. As they filed out with the rest of B Block, Capone caught my eye across the room. He winked. That wink kept me awake for 3 straight nights. It said he knew I'd been watching, knew I'd seen something I shouldn't have. The question was, what was he going to do about it? The answer came Thursday morning during yard time. I was walking the perimeter when Castellano appeared beside me, matching my pace with predatory grace. Up close, he was even more intimidating. Hands like sledgehammers, neck thick as a tree trunk, eyes that had seen too much violence to ever look quite human again. "Nice morning, ain't it, guard?" My mouth went dry. "Keep moving, Castellano." He chuckled, a sound like gravel in a cement mixer. "You know what I like about you, Torino?" He knew my name. How the hell did he know my name? "You got good eyes. See things other people miss." "I don't know what you're talking about." "Sure you do." He stopped walking, forcing me to stop with him or look like I was running away. "You saw something Tuesday night that don't make sense. Something that keeps you up, wondering how a man like Capone lets someone like me disrespect him and walks away breathing." My hand moved instinctively toward my whistle. Castellano noticed, grinning wider. "Here's the thing about seeing, kid. Sometimes what you see ain't what's really happening. Sometimes what looks like disrespect is actually communication. Communication about what? But he was already walking away, leaving me standing there with more questions than answers, and a growing certainty that I'd stumbled into something bigger than prison hierarchy games. That night, I did something I'd never done before. I started keeping a journal. Not an official log, those got reviewed by the warden. This was personal, hidden in my locker behind a loose panel Eddie had shown me my first week. April 17th, 1938. Something's happening between Capone and Castellano. Don't know what, but it's not what it looks like. The spit wasn't random. Neither was Capone's reaction. They know each other somehow. Or they're working together. But that's impossible, isn't it? I filled 3 notebooks that first year, documenting every interaction, every meaningful glance, every seemingly innocent conversation that felt loaded with subtext. What I discovered would haunt me for the next 40 years. 'Cause Marcus Iron Mike Castellano wasn't just another gangster doing hard time. He was something far more dangerous, a federal agent so deep undercover that his own handler had forgotten he existed. And Al Capone, brilliant, paranoid, supposedly syphilis-addled Al Capone, had made him in under a week. What happened next wasn't a partnership between criminals. It was a conspiracy between enemies that would reach into the highest levels of government and leave bodies scattered from Chicago to Washington, D.C. And I was the only witness left alive to tell the story. I still wake up some nights with that wink burned into my retinas. The coffee maker gurgles to life in my Telegraph Hill kitchen, filling the pre-dawn silence with the only sound that makes sense anymore. San Francisco fog presses against the windows like gray cotton, muffling the world outside until it's just me, my memories, and the weight of secrets that have grown heavier with each passing year. I've built a good life on those secrets. 15 true crime books, all bestsellers, all dancing carefully around the edges of what really happened on Alcatraz. The critics call me America's foremost authority on Al Capone's final years. They have no idea how right they are, or how wrong. The irony isn't lost on me. I've made a fortune telling half-truths about the most dangerous truth I know. My hands shake slightly as I pour the coffee, not from age, though 58 isn't exactly young, but from the same nervous energy that's plagued me since 1938. The psychiatrists I saw after leaving Alcatraz called it hypervigilance. I call it staying alive. The Morning Chronicle lands on my doorstep with a wet thud. I don't need to read it to know what's in there. City corruption, federal investigations, the usual dance of power and deception that runs this world. What the paper won't mention is how deep those roots go. How many of today's respectable politicians and businessmen built their empires on the foundation of that long-ago conspiracy between a gangster and a federal agent. Some of them are still alive, still watching, still remembering that there's one loose end they never managed to tie up. The phone rings. For a moment, my blood stops moving. After 40 years of looking over my shoulder, unexpected calls still trigger every survival instinct I have. But it's probably just my publisher, or maybe another interview request about the new Capone documentary everyone's talking about. I let it ring. Instead, I walk to the window and stare out at the fog-shrouded bay. Somewhere out there, invisible in the mist, Alcatraz sits like a tomb on the water. The prison closed in '63, but I can still feel it pulling at me, demanding I return to finish what I started in those hidden journals. The answering machine clicks on. My voice, carefully modulated and calm, invites the caller to leave a message. There's a pause, then, "Dad, it's Sophia. I need to talk to you. It's about your journals, the old ones. I found them." The coffee cup slips from my fingers, shattering on the hardwood floor. Hot liquid spreads like blood across the boards, but I can't move, can't breathe, can't do anything but stare at the machine as my daughter's voice continues. "I know you probably don't want to see me after everything that happened with Mom's funeral, but this is bigger than our family drama. I'm working on something for the Chronicle, and I need to understand what really happened between Capone and Marcus Castellano, because Dad, I think Marcus Castellano is still alive." The line goes dead. Sophia, my brilliant, stubborn, fearless daughter who inherited her mother's investigative instincts and my unfortunate tendency to dig where I shouldn't. We haven't spoken since Helen's funeral 3 years ago, when grief and guilt turned us into strangers hurling accusations across her grave. She blamed me for the distance, the secrets, the way I'd shut them both out whenever the nightmares got too bad. She wasn't wrong. But she was never supposed to find those journals. I'd hidden them in the garage, behind boxes of Helen's clothes I couldn't bring myself to donate. 3 water-stained notebooks filled with observations that could get Sophia killed if the wrong people knew she had them. The same way they'd gotten 12 other people killed over the years. Witnesses, investigators, anyone who got too close to the truth about what Capone and Castellano had really been up to. Heart attacks, car accidents, suicides, all perfectly explainable, all perfectly timed. I sink into my chair, fragments of coffee cup crunching under my feet. The fog outside seems thicker now, more oppressive, like it's trying to smother the city in gray silence. Somewhere in that silence, Sophia is following a trail that leads back to secrets men have killed to protect. My hands find the desk drawer where I keep the .38 I've carried since leaving Alcatraz. It's never been fired, but I've cleaned it religiously for 40 years, the ritual as necessary as breathing. Because I've always known this day would come. Known that eventually, the past would reach out with bloody fingers and drag my family into the darkness I've spent 4 decades trying to escape. I should call her back, warn her off, tell her some stories are too dangerous to tell. But Sophia is Helen's daughter. She won't stop digging just because her father asks her to, which means I have to stop her another way. The gun feels heavier than usual as I lift it from the drawer, its weight familiar yet foreign in my trembling hands. 40 years of cleaning, 40 years of preparation, and I'd always imagined using it on someone else. Never thought it might be the only way to save my daughter from her own curiosity. I'm still staring at the weapon when the doorbell rings. The sound cuts through the morning silence like a scream. No one visits me this early. No one visits me at all, really. The isolation was deliberate, necessary. I've spent 4 decades becoming Vincent Torino, the hermit writer, the eccentric recluse who tells old stories and keeps to himself. Safe, invisible. The bell rings again, followed by 3 sharp knocks that make my chest tighten. Authoritative, impatient, the kind of knocking that says the person on the other side isn't going away. I slide the .38 into my waistband and approach the door on silent feet, muscle memory from my guard days keeping me close to the wall. Through the peephole, I see a figure distorted by the fisheye lens, tall, broad-shouldered, wearing an expensive overcoat that screams federal money. But it's the face that stops my heart. Older, lined with decades of careful living, the dark hair now silver-white. But the eyes are the same, cold, intelligent, predatory. The eyes that watched me across Alcatraz's dining hall while their owner played the most dangerous game ever conceived. Marcus Iron Mike Castellano stands on my doorstep, still alive. Just like Sophia said. My hand moves instinctively toward the gun, but I force myself to stop, to think. If he wanted me dead, I'd already be dead. You don't survive 40 years as a deep-cover federal agent by making social calls on people you plan to kill. This is something else. I unlock the door but leave the chain engaged, opening it just enough to see him clearly. Up close, the years show more. The slight stoop in his shoulders, the careful way he favors his left leg. But the aura of controlled violence remains unchanged, radiating from him like heat. "Hello, Vincent." His voice is rougher now, gravelly with age, but still carrying that undertone of barely contained menace that used to make hardened killers step aside. "We need to talk. I have nothing to say to you." He smiles, the same predatory expression I remember from the yard walks. "Your daughter thinks differently. Sophia's a real go-getter, isn't she? Reminds me of another journalist I knew once. That one ended up taking a header off the Golden Gate Bridge after asking too many questions. The threat hangs in the fog between us like a blade. My hand finds the gun's grip, drawing a chuckle from Castellano. "Easy, Vincent. I'm not here to hurt anybody. I'm here to save them." "Save who?" "Sophia. You. Hell, maybe even myself." He glances past me into the house, noting the broken coffee cup, the scattered papers on my desk. "She called you, didn't she? Told you she found the journals. What she didn't tell you is that she's not the only one looking for them." A chill runs down my spine that has nothing to do with the morning cold. "What are you talking about?" The Chicago families never forgot what happened on the Rock, never stopped wondering what Capone and I talked about during those little dinner conversations. They've had people watching you for years, your books, your interviews, waiting for you to slip up and reveal something useful. His eyes narrow. 3 days ago, someone broke into Sophia's apartment. Professional job. They didn't take anything valuable, but they photographed every document in her files. The world tilts sideways. Sophia's apartment. Someone had been in Sophia's apartment, going through her things, and I hadn't known, hadn't protected her. You're lying. Am I? Check your phone, Vincent. I bet she's called a dozen times in the last week trying to reach you, trying to tell you she was scared that someone was following her. But you've been dodging her calls because you don't want to deal with family drama. He's right. The answering machine has been full of Sophia's messages, each one more urgent than the last. I'd deleted them all without listening, too consumed with my own guilt and grief to hear what she was really saying. Castellano steps closer to the door, his voice dropping to an urgent whisper. They know she has the journals now. They know what's in them, which means they know the truth about what Capone and I were really doing and who we were doing it for. The truth? That every major organized crime takedown in the last 40 years was orchestrated by the same federal task force I worked for. That we've been manipulating both sides of the law to serve interests that go way higher than J. Edgar Hoover ever dreamed. His smile turns grim, and that some very powerful people in Washington would rather see everyone who knows that truth buried than let it come to light. The fog seems to press closer, suffocating. Everything I'd thought I understood about the conspiracy, about Capone and Castellano's relationship, about my own role as witness, it's all been wrong. Bigger than I imagined, deadlier. What do you want? Simple, Castellano says, pulling out a photograph and sliding it under the door. I want you to help me find your daughter before they do. The photo shows Sophia walking out of the Chronicle building yesterday, unaware of the black sedan following her. I stare at the photograph until the image burns into my retinas. Sophia in her navy coat, that determined stride I remember from childhood, completely oblivious to the predators circling. The black sedan's windows are tinted, but I can make out 2 figures in the front seat, patient as vultures. I slide the chain free and step back, but don't invite him in. Can't. 40 years of careful distance, and now this ghost from Alcatraz wants to drag me back into the darkness. I won't help you with anything. Sophia's smart. She can take care of herself. Castellano's laugh is dry as autumn leaves. Smart like her mother was smart. Helen figured out the connection too, you know. Started asking questions about why her husband woke up screaming, why he kept a loaded gun in every room, why he jumped every time the phone rang. The mention of Helen hits like a physical blow. Helen died of cancer. Helen died of cancer 3 months after someone visited her at the hospital. Older gentleman, claimed to be from your publisher. Asked very polite questions about your research methods, your sources, whether you'd ever mentioned specific names from your Alcatraz days. His eyes never leave mine. Funny how her condition deteriorated so rapidly after that, don't you think? My knees buckle. I grab the door frame, the wood grain biting into my palm. Helen's final months, the way the doctors couldn't explain the sudden aggressive turn, how she'd whispered my name with such fear in her eyes those last weeks. You're lying. I'm trying to keep your daughter from suffering the same fate. Castellano glances over his shoulder at the empty street, then back to me. Those men in the sedan aren't freelancers, Vincent. They work for an organization that's kept this secret buried for 4 decades. They've eliminated journalists, federal investigators, even a sitting congressman who got too curious about certain classified operations from the 1940s. I want to slam the door, to retreat into the safety of my carefully constructed isolation. Instead, I hear myself asking, what organization? The same one I've been running from for 15 years, ever since I tried to retire and they decided I knew too much. His voice drops to barely a whisper. The same one that's been using the intelligence Capone gave them to manipulate organized crime for their own purposes. You think the mob wars of the 70s were random? The sudden federal crackdowns that always seemed to eliminate the wrong targets while leaving the real powers untouched? The fog swirls between us, carrying the salt smell of the bay and something else, the metallic tang of approaching violence. I've learned to recognize that scent, the way the air changes when dangerous men start making dangerous moves. Why come to me? You survived this long on your own. Because they found my safe house in Portland last week. Because I'm 73 years old and tired of running. And because your daughter is the key to bringing this whole thing down. He reaches into his coat, slowly showing his hands, and produces a manila folder. Sophia's been more thorough than you think. She's connected dots that took federal investigators years to piece together. If she publishes what she knows, they'll kill her, unless we get to her first. I stare at the folder, knowing that whatever's inside will shatter the last illusion of safety I've managed to maintain. But Sophia's voice echoes in my memory, that excited urgency when she was onto a story, the same tone that used to announce her latest school project or teenage adventure. She's following a trail that leads to killers who've had 40 years to perfect their methods. Where is she now? That's what we need to find out. She missed her check-in with her editor yesterday morning. Her apartment's been empty since Tuesday. Castellano's expression darkens. But I have contacts, resources, people who owe me favors from the old days. The question is whether you're willing to risk everything to save her. A car engine purrs to life somewhere in the fog, too distant to see but close enough to matter. Castellano tenses, his hand moving inside his coat. Time's up, Vincent. They've found me again. He presses the folder against my chest, forcing me to take it. There's a payphone at Pier 39 near the aquarium tonight at midnight. If you want to see Sophia alive again, be there. He turns and walks into the fog, his footsteps muffled but confident. Within seconds, he's invisible, swallowed by the gray morning like a ghost returning to whatever hell spawned him. I stand in my doorway, holding a folder that might contain my daughter's death sentence, listening to the distant sound of engines that could belong to anyone, delivery trucks, commuters, or the patient hunters who finally decided that the last witness to their 40-year-old secret has outlived his usefulness. The phone starts ringing again. I don't move toward the phone. Can't. The manila folder burns in my hands like it's made of fire instead of paper, and I know that whatever's inside will confirm every nightmare I've spent 40 years trying to forget. The ringing cuts through the fog-muffled morning, insistent as a death knell. Finally, the machine picks up. My voice again, that carefully measured tone I've perfected to sound normal, stable, nothing like the broken man who records those messages. Vincent, it's me again. Sophia's voice, but different now. Strained, frightened. Dad, I know you're there. I know you're listening. They were in my apartment last night. I came home and everything was exactly the same, but wrong somehow. Like someone had photographed everything and put it back just slightly off. My legs give out. I sink onto the porch step, still clutching Castellano's folder, while my daughter's terror pours through the speaker. The journals aren't the only thing, Dad. I've been working this story for 6 months, following financial records, tracking shell companies that date back to the 1940s. The money trail leads everywhere. Defense contracts, urban development projects, political campaigns. It's like someone's been using organized crime as a front for something much bigger. She pauses, and I can hear traffic in the background, the distinctive rumble of buses that means she's downtown somewhere, probably at a payphone. Smart girl. She knows her apartment line is compromised. I found Mom's medical records. The words hit me like a sledgehammer. The real ones, not the sanitized versions they gave us. Dad, someone was visiting her. Someone who signed in as your research assistant, but you don't have a research assistant. He came 7 times in her final month, always when you weren't there. The folder slips from my numb fingers, spilling photographs across the wet steps. I see Sophia's apartment taken with a telephoto lens. Sophia leaving the Chronicle building. Sophia meeting with an elderly man in Golden Gate Park who must be Castellano. And underneath it all, a single typewritten note. Subject has made contact. Recommend immediate termination of both assets. Operation Phoenix must not be compromised. The cancer treatments they gave her, Sophia continues, her voice breaking, they weren't standard protocol. I had an oncologist friend review the records. Some of the medications actually accelerated tumor growth. Dad, they didn't just threaten Mom. They killed her slowly and made you watch. The fog swirls around me, but I can barely see it through the rage building behind my eyes. Helen's final weeks, the way she'd clutch my hand and whisper that someone had been asking about me, that the nice man from my publisher had seemed so interested in our family. I'd thought it was the medication making her paranoid. I'd let them murder my wife while I sat beside her bed, holding her hand. I'm scared, Dad. Really scared. But I'm also close to something huge. The man you knew as Marcus Castellano, his real name was Michael Torres, and he wasn't just working undercover for the FBI. He was part of something called Operation Phoenix, a joint CIA Justice Department task force that used criminal organizations to destabilize foreign governments and eliminate domestic threats. The pieces clicked together in my mind like bullets sliding into a chamber. Capone's calm reaction to the spitting incident wasn't just recognition, it was confirmation. The old gangster had been feeding information to a federal agent, yes, but not to bring down the mob, to help shape it, control it, turn it into a weapon that could be aimed at anyone who threatened certain interests. They've been using the intelligence networks ever since, Sophia continues, tracking dissidents, eliminating journalists who get too close to classified operations, maintaining control through violence while keeping their hands clean. And it's still active, Dad. Still running. Still killing. A car door slams somewhere in the fog, closer than before. I gather up the scattered photographs, my hands shaking so badly I can barely hold them. One image stops me cold, a surveillance photo of Helen leaving the hospital the day before she died, with a man in a dark coat walking 20 feet behind her. The same coat I'd seen on Castellano this morning. I have proof, Sophia says. Documents, financial records, testimony from 3 former operatives who are willing to go on record. But I need the journals, Dad. I need your first-hand account of how it all started. Because without that, it's just conspiracy theory garbage that no one will believe. The phone goes quiet except for the sound of her breathing, and I realize she's crying. My brilliant, fearless daughter is crying because she's uncovered a truth so monstrous it's broken something inside her. Please, she whispers. I know we haven't talked since the funeral. I know you blame yourself for Mom, and maybe you should. But this is bigger than our family drama. This is about stopping them before they kill anyone else. The line goes dead just as footsteps approach through the fog. Measured, confident steps that remind me of Castellano's morning visit. But these footsteps belong to more than one person. I stuff the photographs inside my jacket and move toward the back of the house, muscle memory from 40 years of paranoid preparation kicking in. 3 sets of footsteps, maybe 4, approaching from different angles. Professional spacing. They've done this before. The .38 feels inadequate in my hand as I slip through the kitchen toward the rear door. But then I stop, frozen by a sound that makes my blood turn to ice water. Laughter. Soft, familiar laughter, drifting through my open front door. Vincent? A woman's voice calls out, warm and amused. Are you hiding from us? That's not very neighborly. I know that voice, know it better than my own heartbeat, because I've been hearing it in my dreams for the last 8 months, whispering comfort during the long nights when grief threatens to swallow me whole. Helen, my dead wife, is standing in my living room. I stumble back toward the front of the house, the gun forgotten. My rational mind screaming that this is impossible while my heart hammers against my ribs. She's there, silhouetted in the doorway, wearing the blue dress I bought her for our 20th anniversary. Her hair catches the light the way it did when we were young, before the cancer hollowed out her cheeks and dulled her eyes. Hello, sweetheart, she says, and her smile is exactly as I remember, crooked on the left side, the imperfection that made her beautiful. Did you miss me? You're dead. The words scrape out of my throat like broken glass. You're dead, Helen. I watch them lower you into the ground. She steps closer, and I can smell her perfume, that subtle lavender scent she wore every day of our marriage. Death is just another kind of assignment, Vincent. Surely you understand that by now. The fog outside seems to follow her in, curling around her feet like smoke. Behind her, I catch glimpses of other figures, 3 men in dark coats, watching with the patient stillness of professional killers. You're not real. I'm as real as your guilt, as real as the nights you wake up screaming my name. Her voice carries that gentle reproach I remember so well, the tone she used when I'd been drinking too much or disappearing too deep into my research. You think you failed to protect me, don't you? Poor Vincent carrying all that unnecessary shame. My back hits the wall beside my desk, and I realize I'm retreating from my own wife's ghost. The photographs from Castellano's folder are scattered across the floor at her feet, including the surveillance image of her final hospital visit. Helen glances down at the pictures, her expression shifting to something colder, more knowing. You want to understand what really happened? Fine, let me explain. She picks up the hospital photograph, studying it with clinical detachment. That man following me wasn't a threat, Vincent. He was my handler. The words hit me like a physical blow. Handler? Did you really think it was coincidence that you ended up at Alcatraz, a farm boy from Ohio with no law enforcement experience, suddenly assigned to the most secure prison in America right when the most important intelligence operation in modern history was reaching its climax? Her laugh is different now, harder, stripped of warmth. I was supposed to keep you stable, Vincent, keep you happy and distracted so you'd never look too closely at what you'd witnessed. The room spins around me. 26 years of marriage, 26 years of love, laughter, shared dreams, and whispered secrets, all of it a lie. The cancer was real, she continues, her voice taking on a businesslike efficiency. But my assignment was over. You'd never talked about the Capone incident, never written about it, never posed a threat. I was ready to retire, to live out whatever time I had left as just your wife. She sets the photograph on my desk with deliberate care. But then Sophia started digging, following financial trails, asking uncomfortable questions, making the same connections that could bring down 40 years of careful work. Helen's eyes meet mine, and they're empty of everything I thought I knew about her. So they activated my final protocol, which was to break you completely, make you so consumed with grief and guilt that you'd never be able to function as a witness if Sophia got too close to the truth. Her smile returns, but now it looks like a blade. They underestimated her, though. Underestimated how much like me she really is. One of the men behind her steps forward, young, clean-shaven, wearing the kind of expensive suit that screams federal money. He places a hand on Helen's shoulder with casual possession. Your wife was one of our best deep-cover operatives, he says. 26 years of perfect performance. It's almost a shame we had to burn her. The .38 is in my hand again, though I don't remember drawing it. Helen looks at the gun with mild interest, the way she used to study crossword puzzles over morning coffee. You won't shoot me, Vincent. You never could hurt the people you love. You're right, I whisper, and point the gun at the man beside her. But I never loved him. The man with the expensive suit doesn't flinch when I aim at his chest. His calm confidence tells me everything I need to know about how many times he stared down desperate men with guns. But there's something else in his eyes, a flicker of miscalculation, like he's suddenly realizing that grief can make even cowards dangerous. Vincent, Helen says, her voice carrying that patient tone she used when I'd had too many drinks and was getting belligerent. Put the gun down. You're only making this harder on yourself. Harder? The word comes out as a bark of laughter that sounds nothing like me. Helen, they killed you, used you up like a disposable asset, and threw you away when Sophia got too close to their precious secret. I volunteered for this life. Her fingers trace the edge of my desk, a gesture so familiar it makes my chest ache. Do you think I was some innocent victim? I chose this, Vincent. Chose you as an assignment and chose to stay when the assignment became something else. The federal agent shifts his weight slightly, and I catch the movement in my peripheral vision. His hand hovers near his jacket, professional habit, muscle memory that says he's calculating angles and exit strategies. Sophia's already dead, he says, matter of fact as discussing the weather. Car accident on Highway 1 about an hour ago. Tragic loss of a promising journalist. The words punch through me like hollow-point bullets, but something in his timing feels wrong, too convenient, too clean. Sophia's voice on the answering machine had been terrified but determined, not defeated. She'd spent 6 months building this story, developing sources, learning tradecraft from necessity. You're lying, I say, keeping the gun trained on his center mass. "If Sophia were dead, you wouldn't be here. You'd be cleaning up loose ends, not wasting time with psychological warfare." Helen's expression flickers, just for a second, but long enough for me to catch the flash of something that might have been pride, or annoyance that her handler underestimated the man she'd spent 26 years studying. "She's resourceful," Helen admits. "More like me than either of us realized. It took us 3 days to track her down after she went underground." "Took you where?" The federal agent's hand moves closer to his jacket. "That's classified information, Mr. Torino. But I can tell you that your daughter is currently in federal custody, being debriefed about her investigation. Cooperate with us, and she might survive the experience. I've spent 40 years living with the weight of keeping one terrible secret. 40 years of nightmares, of jumping at shadows, of seeing threats in every stranger's face. But standing here in my own living room, staring at the woman I loved, the woman who never existed, I finally understand what Castellano meant about being tired. Tired of running, tired of hiding, tired of letting other people control the narrative of my own life. Here's what's going to happen," I say, my voice steadier than it has any right to be. "You're going to tell me exactly where Sophia is being held. You're going to explain what Operation Phoenix really was, and what it became, and then you're going to help me burn this whole thing to the ground." The agent actually smiles at that. "Or what? You'll shoot me? Kill a federal officer in front of witnesses?" "No." I shift my aim slightly, pointing the barrel at Helen's chest. "I'll shoot my wife's ghost and see if she bleeds government secrets." For the first time since this nightmare started, Helen looks genuinely surprised. The mask slips completely, revealing something cold and calculating underneath, the real woman who spent decades manipulating my emotions with surgical precision. "You won't," she says, but there's uncertainty in her voice now. "Vincent, I know you. Better than anyone alive. I know you. You couldn't pull that trigger if your life depended on it." My life doesn't matter anymore. The truth of that statement settles over me like a shroud, but Sophia's does. And maybe, for the first time in 40 years, I can actually protect someone I love instead of watching them get destroyed by secrets I was too weak to confront. The federal agent reaches for his weapon, but I'm already moving. Decades of paranoid preparation finally paying dividends. The coffee table between us becomes cover as Helen dives sideways, her movements too quick and practiced for a dead woman. The front door explodes inward in a shower of splinters and fog. Marcus Castellano stands in the wreckage, holding a shotgun that looks like it could stop a truck. Behind him, 2 more figures emerge from the gray morning. An elderly black man with intelligent eyes and a woman in her 30s who moves like Sophia but isn't quite Sophia. "Sorry we're late," Castellano says, his voice carrying the weight of 73 years and decades of violence. "Traffic was murder." The federal agent freezes, his hand halfway to his weapon, as Helen's perfect mask finally shatters completely. "Hello, Michael," she says to Castellano. "It's been a long time." The silence stretches like a wire about to snap. Castellano's shotgun never wavers from the federal agent, while Helen, my Helen who isn't Helen, stares at him with the recognition of old colleagues who've traveled very different paths. 40 years, Castellano says, his voice carrying the weight of every buried secret. 40 years I've been waiting for this conversation, wondering if you'd eventually come for the last loose ends. The woman behind him steps into my peripheral vision and my heart nearly stops. It's Sophia, alive, breathing, furious. Her clothes are dirty and her left wrist shows rope burns, but her eyes burn with that familiar investigative fire that made her mother so proud. "Dad," she says, never taking her gaze off Helen, "meet Marcus Castellano and Dr. James Washington." The elderly black man nods slightly. Turns out Iron Mike has been collecting evidence about Operation Phoenix for decades. Insurance, he calls it. The federal agent's hand completes its journey to his weapon, but Castellano's shotgun swings toward him with practiced ease. "I wouldn't recommend that, Agent Powell. Your people already tried the direct approach when they grabbed Sophia yesterday. Didn't work out well for them." Helen's laugh carries no warmth. "Michael, you always were sentimental about witnesses. It's why you made such a poor operative." "Maybe, but it's why I'm still breathing while half our old team is in unmarked graves." Castellano's eyes find mine. Tell him, Vincent, tell him what you really saw that day in Alcatraz when I spit in Capone's food. The moment crystallizes around us, past and present colliding in my fog-shrouded living room. 4 decades of nightmares and buried truth, all balanced on the edge of my voice. Capone smiled, I whisper. When the spit hit his mashed potatoes, he smiled. Then he looked around the dining hall like he was counting witnesses, and his face went cold. Not angry, calculating. He wiped the spit away, took a bite, and said just loud enough for me to hear, "Message received, Agent Torres. The Chicago books are clean, just like we discussed." Agent Powell's composure finally cracks. That's impossible. Castellano was deep cover for 18 months. Capone couldn't have known I was federal? Of course he knew. Castellano shifts his weight, the shotgun steady as stone. Al Capone wasn't some street thug by 1938. He was a businessman who understood that survival meant adaptation. The government needed his networks intact for what was coming. The war, the Cold War, operations that required criminal infrastructure they couldn't officially acknowledge. Sophia steps closer to me, and I can see the pieces fitting together in her journalist's mind. The spitting was theater, a public demonstration that you were still undercover, still gathering intelligence. But privately, Al and I had been working together for months. Castellano's smile is bitter. Operation Phoenix wasn't about dismantling organized crime. It was about federalizing it, creating a shadow network of criminals who answered to Washington instead of the old country bosses. Dr. Washington speaks for the first time, his voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to being heard. I was a young psychiatrist then, brought in to evaluate the psychological sustainability of the operation. What I found was a system designed to create permanent leverage over criminal organizations through controlled intelligence, leaks, and strategic prosecutions. Helen's mask has completely fallen away, revealing the operative underneath. The program was a success. We prevented 3 attempted foreign infiltrations of the American underworld, eliminated 17 communist agitators, and maintained domestic stability through 5 decades of global upheaval. And murdered how many journalists, judges, and politicians who threatened to expose the arrangement. Sophia's voice cuts through the room like a blade. Agent Powell makes his choice, diving for cover behind my kitchen doorway while clawing for his weapon. But Castellano anticipated the movement, and the shotgun's roar fills my house with thunder. Plaster explodes from the doorframe 6 inches from Powell's head. "Next one won't miss," Castellano says conversationally. "Now sit down and listen to the man whose life you've been destroying." The weight of 40 years settles on my shoulders, but for the first time it feels manageable, shareable. The secret that's been eating me alive suddenly becomes just words, terrible, necessary words that need to be spoken. "They killed Helen to break me," I say, looking directly at my daughter. "Used her cancer treatment as cover for a slow-motion execution. Made me watch her die while believing it was natural, then sent her back as psychological warfare to keep me quiet." Helen, the thing wearing Helen's face, steps toward me with predatory grace. "You understand now, don't you, Vincent? This is bigger than your family, bigger than your pain. Some secrets serve a greater good." I raise the .38, pointing it directly at her heart. No. Some secrets just serve powerful people who've forgotten the difference between necessary evil and evil for its own sake. The trigger feels surprisingly light under my finger. The gunshot echoes through my house like a thunderclap, but it's Agent Powell who fires, not me. His bullet catches Helen in the shoulder, spinning her around as she reaches for something hidden beneath her blue dress. The dress I thought meant love, now revealed as just another costume in a 40-year performance. She hits the floor hard, crimson spreading across fabric I once kissed goodnight. But even wounded, bleeding, she's still looking at me with those eyes I thought I knew. "Vincent," she gasps, and for just a moment, her voice carries the weight of something real. "I did love you. That part wasn't the assignment." Powell steps from behind the doorway, his weapon trained on Castellano. "Drop it, old man. This operation is classified above your clearance level." "My clearance level?" Castellano's laugh is dry as autumn leaves. "Son, I helped write the book you're reading from. Phoenix was my operation before you were born." The shotgun thunders again. Powell's weapon spins across my hardwood floor as he clutches his hand, howling. Dr. Washington moves with surprising speed for his age, kicking the agent's gun under my couch and zip-tying his wrists with practiced efficiency. Medical training, he explains to my startled look. You learn to restrain violent patients. Sophia kneels beside Helen, pressing her jacket against the wound. The investigative journalist in her wars with the daughter who remembers this woman making pancakes every Sunday morning for 6 years. How many others? Sophia asks. How many families did they destroy to keep this quiet? Helen's breathing is shallow but steady. 17, maybe 20. We lost count after the senator's wife in 73. Her eyes find mine. Vincent, the journal's in your desk. Top drawer, false bottom. Everything's there. Names, dates, bank transfers. I kept insurance too. I move like a sleepwalker to my desk. The same desk where I've spent 20 years writing sanitized stories about Alcatraz, never touching the one truth that mattered. The false bottom gives way to reveal a manila envelope thick with documents, bank records, assassination orders, photographs of meetings between federal agents and crime bosses. And there, in Helen's careful handwriting, a complete operational history of Phoenix from 1938 to last Tuesday. Why, I whisper, why keep evidence of your own crimes? Because I got tired too, Helen says, her voice growing weaker. Tired of watching them use love as a weapon. Tired of being their perfect operative. When the cancer came back last month, the real cancer, not the accelerated version they gave me 3 years ago, I decided it was time to clean house. The fog outside begins to lift as morning sun filters through my windows. 40 years of shadows, finally touched by light. Sophia stands, her jacket now soaked with blood. She's going to live, but she needs a hospital. No hospitals. Powell snarls from the floor. This operation is classified. She dies here or in a federal medical facility. Castellano chambers another round. Agent Powell, you're going to call off your cleanup team, release any other witnesses you were holding, and disappear so deep into bureaucracy that sunlight never finds you again. You can't threaten a federal... I'm not threatening anyone. Castellano's smile is winter cold. I'm explaining reality. Dr. Washington has spent 40 years documenting Phoenix casualties for a war crimes tribunal that's been waiting for enough evidence. Sophia has enough source material to make Watergate look like a parking ticket. And Vincent, he looks at me. Vincent has finally found his voice. I stare down at the journals, at Helen's blood on my floor, at the wreckage of everything I thought I knew about my life. The grief is still there, will always be there, but it's changing shape, becoming something useful instead of paralyzing. I'm going to write the real story, I say. All of it. The truth about Capone, about Phoenix, about what happens when good intentions get poisoned by power and secrecy. Helen reaches out with her uninjured arm, her fingers brushing mine. Make it count, sweetheart. Make it all count. 6 hours later, I sit at my kitchen table across from Sophia, both of us nursing coffee that's gone cold, while we sort through decades of hidden history. The ambulance took Helen 20 minutes ago. Powell disappeared into federal custody with threats that feel increasingly hollow. She really did love you, Sophia says quietly. At the end, when she thought she was dying, all she talked about was how proud she was of the man you became, despite everything they put you through. Outside, the fog has completely lifted, revealing San Francisco Bay in sharp, clear detail. For the first time in 40 years, I can see all the way to the island. I'm going back to Alcatraz tomorrow, I tell my daughter. Going to stand in that dining hall and remember exactly how it felt to witness history. Then I'm going to write it down, every word, and let the consequences fall where they may. Sophia reaches across the table and takes my hand. We'll write it together, Dad. Some stories are too big for one person to carry alone. The weight on my shoulders shifts, redistributes, becomes shareable. Outside, morning light dances on water that once held so many secrets. Some of them, finally, are ready to surface.